Bonjour, hi Canada. I'm Hugh Hewitt, live inside the Beltway. There's a lot of bad economic news this morning, but I want to remind people, last night the fetching Mrs. Hewitt and I went to the first showing of a rough cut on a documentary about the collapse of our Afghanistan effort and the mayhem and tragedy of Abbey Gate, where 13 American servicemen were blown up, and of tens of thousands of allies, many thousand American citizens as well, but tens of thousands of allies abandoned despite the best efforts of private citizens rushing to their aid. And it's an amazing documentary. I'll tell you about it more when it's more. But it was a debut for about a handful of 50 or 60 people. Senator Tillis was there. Congressman Michael Waltz. My friend John Andrazik, whose music you just heard, was there. But Tim Kennedy, UFC fighter, also played a major role, and his book party was last night. But it just puts into perspective an American set of economic problems are nothing like, I have to throw my baby into the hands of this stranger over this wall because the world is settling into darkness in Afghanistan. Indeed, it has. So as I go through this terrible, terrible set of Biden inflation, Biden recession, Biden bear market news headlines, keep in mind we are blessed to be in America. Bear markets end. They don't last very long, actually. I mean, the 2020 bear market lasted 148 days from the time that COVID began to rattle markets. I don't know how long this is a stagflation bear market, and that could last longer. The 1980 bear market, the Jimmy Carter bear market, lasted 2,114 days. So the last time we had a president as incompetent as President Biden was President Carter. And he brought about a bear market of 2,114 days in length. That means the stock market decline that is greater than 20%, that begins high and goes down, 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 and never recaptures its high for 2,114 days. Now, the duration of the bear market itself in 2020, the COVID sell-off was 33 days. That was it. Then people figured, hey, I'm going to buy Amazon. And maybe Netflix, people are going to stay home. People adjusted pretty quickly. Thus far, the bear market duration has been 161 days. But when you go back to the Carter years, oh my gosh, that thing was a nightmare. It began under Carter. It ended in August of 1982. It took Reagan. People still crushed him at the elections. It took Reagan about 3 years to turn it around. It will take the next president 3 years to turn around Biden. But the bear market may end more quickly than not because markets are more efficient. But yesterday's bad news is in the context of, thank God you're an American after last night. All right. So European shares have gained some this morning. That's the good news. I'll do a market report in the next segment. The bad news is that U.S. stocks sunk almost 4% yesterday, and they officially entered bear market, down 20% from the highs. And when the S&P 500 enters a bear market, the Dow and the NASDAQ are also going to be in a bear market, and that's where we are. The Fed is making this happen because, of course, the Biden inflation, fueled by the $4 trillion in unnecessary spending last year, that's it. That's it. Not Putin, it's Biden. Putin is not helping us end this, but Biden started it by printing $4 trillion. And the Democratic House and the Democratic Senate. Just blowing money all over the place. It's just, I went back and asked Dwayne to pull an old Saturday Night live bit from when Dan Aykroyd was young. So it's a long time ago. He's playing Jimmy Carter. I don't know, is it 1978, 1979? And when he's playing Jimmy Carter, he's talking about the benefits of inflation. You're going to have Biden would give this very speech, except he can't make the teleprompter work. And so Jimmy Carter was a young man, and Dan Aykroyd, when he taped this, was a young man. But this is from 1979. Dan Aykroyd, please, cut number 21.
Inflation is our friend. For example, consider this. In the year 2000, if current trends continue, the average blue-collar annual wage in this country will be $568,000. Think what this inflated world of the future will mean. Most Americans will be millionaires. Everyone will feel like a big shot. Wouldn't you like to own a $4,000 suit and smoke a $75 cigar drive a $600,000 car? I know I would. But what about people on fixed incomes? They have always been the true victims of inflation. That's why I will present to Congress the Inflation Maintenance Program, whereby the U.S. Treasury will make up any inflation-caused losses through direct tax rebates to the public in cash. Now, you may say, won't that cost a lot of money? Won't that increase the deficit? Sure it will. But so what? We'll just print more money. We have the papers, we have the mints. I can just call up the Bureau of Engraving and say, hi, this is Jimma. Roll off some of them 20s. Print up a couple of thousand sheets of those century notes. Sure, the glut of dollars will cause even more inflation, but who cares? Everybody will be a millionaire.
Everyone will be a millionaire. That is what, the basic modern monetary policy believes, is you can print your way to success. But Biden and Carter are the same. You got to cut spending, you got to cut taxes, you got to raise interest rates. It's that simple. So the Fed is going to consider a three-quarter point hike at its meeting today and tomorrow. Now, world shares inch higher according to Reuters, and Wall Street is sending signals that it's over and the sell-off is sold. You don't know. All I know is, I hate to say I told you so, but I told you so about Bitcoin and crypto. It's just been crushed. It's down 50% plus over where it was. A lot of the crypto lenders have blocked customers from pulling funds. The biggest, Celsius, said, no, we have extreme market conditions, so we can't give you your money back. That is not a market, actually. That's called a bank failure. And crypto, if you don't understand it, don't buy it. I know a couple of celebrities went out there and they really invested heavily, and a lot of third world companies thought they'd get rich quickly on the basis of the new crypto, and it's all turned to trash. The market cap of crypto has fallen below $1 trillion. It was at its peak of $3 trillion in November of 2021. That's the bubble this time. It's not the housing bubble like it was in 2000. And, 2008 was a general sell-off of everything, but the housing bubble burst in a few times. 1987, the dot-com bubble burst in the Clinton years. This is the crypto bubble bursting, and it's a pretty hard fall for people who said, I'm going to invest everything in my Robinhood crypto stocks. So that's all the terrible news. I'll give you a market update after the break. But remember, bear markets turn around. Don't sell your stocks. It's going to be over in a matter of a year or so. It'll start going back up again. Don't panic. I had one friend who's now gone to their reward, who sold everything in the last bear market collapse. And I told that individual, don't do what you're doing. Just don't sell a thing. Just keep working. Don't pay attention, because it's not got anything to do with your choices. But I also tell people, dollar cost average income investing is what works over a lifetime. You put the same amount of money into the market every single month, and you are in good shape at the end of 30 or 40 or 50 years. And that's all you got to do. But you can't go around trying to be a trader, because there are people who are smarter than you. Internationally, the Israeli government is so wobbly, it's like a top. The coalition will collapse within a week or two, says Prime Minister Bennett, unless his members, his MKs, stop rebelling. Ukraine is fearing a defeat in the east unless they get a lot of artillery and ammunition, which the Joe Biden administration is mysteriously not delivering on time because they're incompetent at everything. Boris Johnson is doing the opposite of what Reagan did. He will not cut taxes because he doesn't want to cut taxes. He's not a conservative. China has rattled its saber. Taiwan asks, according to the New York Times, are we ready for war? And this one really drives me crazy. High-ranking Afghan officials escaped to luxury homes abroad, according to the Wall Street Journal this morning. According to a Wall Street Journal review of public documents, interviews, and other records, some officials who had top jobs during Afghanistan President Ashraf Ghani's tenure, which started in 2014, are now living in mansions along California's coast, the UAE, major European cities, and Turkey. They got out before the collapse. And as I said, I saw this documentary last night about August 2021, which is the saddest thing I've seen in a long time. And it will be everywhere, by the way. That's a Joe Biden special. And along with the Joe Biden recession, the Joe Biden inflation, the Joe Biden bear market, the Joe Biden recession, The Joe Biden-led collapse of Afghanistan, a shameful moment in American government history. I'm coming right back, America. On the Tuesday edition, live from the Beltway, I'm Hugh Hewitt. Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. David M. Drucker is my guest from the Washington Examiner. You see him all over the news media. The Trump Factor is his book. David, the Biden inflation has led to the Biden interest rates, which will trigger the Biden recession and has now triggered a Biden bear market. His approval ratings have entered historic lows by the measurement of Gallup and new lows by the measurement of Quinnipiac. Does anybody care about the one? There is a bit of news. I learned yesterday that Kim made Guilfoyle. How do I say her name?
Kimberly Guilfoyle.
Yeah, she made $60,000 for a speech at the rally. That's what we learned yesterday. And against the backdrop of 401ks, et cetera, I just don't think people care.
Well, look, I think, Hugh, whenever you have an economy that's trouble or people feel like they're struggling or they just feel insecure about the economy, they're going to care about that more than anything else, and often, to the exclusion of everything else. And so there are two issues here. Are the hearings worthwhile? Is the investigation necessary? What is the political impact going to be? I'd argue the investigation is necessary, and the hearings might end up producing very substantive information that people ought to know about. I don't think it's going to have much of an impact on the politics of 2022 because the problem that is front and center is the kind of problem that always supersedes everything. Only when, we can look back on the last midterm election, 2018, only when the economy is going like gangbusters might people say to themselves, I can get angry about something else.
David, I'm going to argue with you because hearings only matter when they're about an incumbent president, whether it's Iran-Contra or Watergate, or about a pressing crime like Esther Skifoffer in the organized crime hearings. They do not matter when it's run by a rump committee that's not viewed as legitimate by half the country. I mean, they just don't. It's objectively true, and Liz Cheney's a friend of mine. It's just objectively true. Nobody cares except people who are just obsessed with Trump. And that's fine. They can be obsessed with Trump, but it ain't going to move the needle. Meanwhile, I just had a 70-year-old listener who has lived in lockdown, shutdown at a retirement community in Ohio call. Said 2 years they played by the rules. Now they can't afford to go anywhere. And you know what? That resonated with me. There are a lot of people out there who stayed at home for 2 years and now they can't afford to go anywhere now that they're allowed to go somewhere.
Yep, that's going to be the overriding issue in this election if and until the economy ever improves. By the way, my argument with you isn't that the committee can matter politically, but I would argue even if this was a traditional select committee with Republicans participating, freely allowed to appoint whomever they wanted, and providing pushback at various points throughout the committee if they disagreed with some of the findings or just, we're playing the role of defense attorney or prosecutor or whatever, it still wouldn't matter. It's not so much the makeup of the committee or how it came together or how it's functioning. The kind of economic pain or insecurity or both that people are feeling in a midterm election with the party in power and control of everything, House, Senate, and the White House, it makes it very hard, if at all, for any other news to break through absent national security crises and things of that matter.
Yeah, the only thing that actually matters in a hearing is do they produce information that assists the Department of Justice in making indictments, which this is not doing. Indeed, it's hindering prosecution of people, I've been told by people involved in the prosecutions. But to me, the overwhelming fact, I saw a first cut of a documentary on the collapse in Afghanistan. People, when they vote, if they can ignore anything about their current economic price, the price of gas, they'll look back at Afghanistan and they'll say, my gosh, this guy's just not competent. I really think the Democrats are going to get hammered, David.
Well, they are going to get hammered. I mean, if the election were held today, they would get hammered. So, my only caveat every time I discuss the election is the election's not being held today. But look, we can look at midterm elections historically. We know what's coming. We see the polling. We see what the political environment is like. President Biden has issues with his own party, let alone independent voters, and so it's just really a rough environment out there for anybody with a D next to their name.
And David, people can't make up when a bear market happens. This happened yesterday. They've lost 20% of their net wealth in 5 months. Yeah, 5 months. It began in January. All under this Biden Democrat Senate, Democrat House. They lost 20% of their net wealth. If they own Bitcoin, they lost half of their net wealth in January. That can't be made up. That cake is baked. Am I right?
Usually, Hugh, when we get to this point in a midterm election cycle, the cake is baked. In other words, you might on the margins be able to claw back some seats that when we get to this fall, maybe the Democrats can claw back some seats that if the election were held in June, they would have lost. But the cake, it's very hard for any president. And I've seen this enough now over just 20 years. And then you can look at midterm elections before I was doing this for a living. You get to a certain point in the cycle and it's baked and it's hard to unravel.
That's where Adam Laxalt is going to get nominated in Nevada today, and Nevada voters get out there and vote. And I think Adam Laxalt's going to beat Senator Cortez Masto in November, and I don't think there's anything she can do about it because people don't drive to Las Vegas from California on the weekend when gas is $6.50 a gallon. And that means Vegas suffers, Nevada, Reno suffers, everybody suffers. David Drucker, the Beltway is a fortress against reality. Its walls are high, but reality is still cresting over it. I'll be right back. America Hour number 2 of the Tuesday edition. David M. Drucker is your Twitter follow for David. I'll be right back on the second hour of today's Hugh Hewitt Show. Morning, glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. I'm Hugh Hewitt, live inside the Beltway on this Tuesday, the 14th day of June in the year of our Lord 2022. My guest is Byron York, who you read in the Washington Examiner every morning. You should get his newsletter. You see him on Fox News. Byron, I began the show by talking about how the Biden inflation led to the Biden interest rates, which have triggered the Biden bear market, which will bring about a Biden recession. And that's the number one story. But I would not have known about the most idiotic question I've ever heard a golf reporter ask a golfer had you not posted last night about Phil Mickelson. And poor Phil has been playing the U.S. Open for 30 years, and he's never won it. I love the guy. I think he's a professional's professional. Would you tell people what happened yesterday? Because that was, if I had not seen your tweet, I would not have known it.
Well, since I don't have an official golf reporter license, I don't do this a lot, but I have been following the story. You know, there's an alternative golf league funded by the Saudis called Live Golf, L-I-V Golf. And it's supposed to make golf a little more exciting. The tournaments are only 3 days long instead of 4, and they've got the team concept, and they're trying to jazz up the golf experience a little bit. And the big deal is it is funded by the Saudi Public Investment Fund, and it is just dropping huge amounts of money to golfers to come join them. Yep. And there are reports that Mickelson has been paid more than $200 million to do this. They offered Tiger Woods what was called a high 9 figures offer, which I can do the math, is close to $1 billion.
Yep.
They pay a lot for their prize money, and they've attracted a number of pros. The PGA Tour finds this incredibly threatening. And the PGA Tour has suspended its members who are playing Live Golf, including Phil Mickelson.
Yeah, the PGA Tour is a cartel, right? The PGA Tour is a cartel, yeah. And like the NFL, when it faced the AFL or the USFL, it reacts poorly to competition.
Exactly. So what you've seen is this huge sense of moral outrage in the golfing press that these players, like Mickelson and Dustin Johnson, Bryson DeChambeau has just joined, Patrick Reed, those are the big Americans who are in it, are taking blood money because it's coming from the Saudis. And this is an immoral exercise. And this has been going on and on and on in the golf commentariat. And you have to remember a lot of the golf media organizations have very close relationships with the PGA Tour. So there's this heavy moral undertone to this. So Mickelson goes to the U.S. Open, does his press conference yesterday, and he is literally asked, there's the 9/11 families, because, of course, the Saudis were a major force behind 9/11. I mean, 18 or 19 of the hijackers were Saudis. And so the 9/11 families have written this letter about Mickelson and Live Golf, and they shouldn't be doing it. So Mickelson has actually asked the question whether he is a partner to Osama bin Laden and the 9/11 hijackers.
I know. I watched it. A jaw-dropping question, but what it made me reflect on. I had just come from the rough cut of the documentary on America's collapse in Afghanistan, so I was pretty heated up when I got home last night because it's horrible to rewatch what happened in August of last year and how the Biden administration failed Afghanistan and America abandoned its allies. And, people are doing these January 6 hearings that no one's paying attention to, or a very small number of people. I shouldn't say no one. A very small percentage of Americans are watching. But they're Trump haters. People are addicted to Trump. And after I watched your thing, I thought, anytime a major disintermediation occurs, whether it's the car and the horse and buggy, the airplane and the train, the PGA golf being disintermediated by LIV, whether or not it's American politics disintermediated by Trump media, or whether it's Beltway bigs being, dragged by the undertow of Trump away from contracts and relevance, people get angry because their lives are going upside down and they're not making money, Byron. It's always about the money.
Yes, and interestingly enough, that is the prime criticism from the PGA Tour of the Live Golf players, that they're just doing it for money. And of course, the money is huge. They are doing it for money.
They are doing it for the money. Yes,
they are. But of course, it's about money for the PGA Tour. Now, what I said last night, has anyone noticed that President Biden is about to visit Saudi Arabia, where he will meet with Mohammed bin Salman, MBS, and top Biden officials have already been meeting with Mohammed bin Salman because we're begging them to produce more oil. Does anybody look at the United States military presence in Saudi Arabia bases? The number of U.S. military personnel, it is a very, very valuable ally in that region. And by the way, some liberals have got kind of this strange new respect for George W. Bush, in the Trump years. And there's a photo of George W. Bush holding the hand of the Saudi crown prince after 9/11 in 2005 or 6. Yeah. So, the fact is the United States has a relationship with Saudi Arabia. Joe Biden is putting aside the Jamal Khashoggi affair because he has geopolitical and domestic political reasons to do so. And golf has gotten itself into a moral fit about Saudi Arabia, which is
But my point is, it's not really moral panic. It's really economic panic. Yeah. Because all of the people tied up with the PGA cartel are going to be disintermediated if the Saudi LIV-funded tour spins off a new golf channel and a new golf magazine and golf courses around the world that draw people and new club manufacturers, and somebody takes on Titleist and Ping. Now, I'm not a golfer anymore. I was too bad at it. I gave it up. But I am just amused. Phil Mickelson, by the way, I don't know what's been going on with Phil for 4 months. He gave this, I've been off doing therapy for 4 months. I said, what? What happened? What did I miss? And then out of the left field comes Osama bin Laden in the LIV. And I thought, what in the world is happening? Meanwhile, Byron York, the bear market arrived yesterday. And that means senior Americans not only can't afford to go. I had a 70-year-old lady call me in the first hour. It's heartbreaking. They've lived in a senior community during shutdown. They followed all the rules. Now that they can get out, they can't afford to go anywhere. This is the Jimmy Carter years.
I heard her. And when you said that, did you know that Ben Bernanke has an article in the New York Times this morning?
I do not.
And it's actually quite interesting. And basically, the thrust of the article is, no, it's not going to be as bad as the 70s because the Fed now makes use of more inflation-fighting tools. But he did say something. He said, from the beginning of 1966 through 1981, 15 years, from the beginning of 66 through 81, the consumer price index rose on average by more than 7% per year.
Oh, yeah.
Peaking at over 13% in 1980. This period also saw 2 major and 2 minor recessions and an approximately 2/3 decline in the Dow Jones Industrial Average when adjusted for inflation.
Stagflation. It was stagflation.
Incredible.
And then Reagan came along, cut spending, cut taxes, and defended America. And by 1984, it was fine. And I think,
most importantly, as far as inflation is concerned, Volcker
raised interest rates.
Raises interest rates. The nation does go through a very painful recession, and then it gets a lot better.
Yeah, I tell you, if the Republicans run on cutting spending and producing energy to lower the price of oil, they will sweep all before them.
Yeah, I think the important thing for Republicans also to say is clearly Biden made inflation, and Democrats made inflation worse with their spending proposals. And the important thing to remember is if they had had their way, they would have made it far worse still. Yep. You have to remember,
$2 more trillion.
There seems to be a consensus among talking heads, even among Democrats, that the American Rescue Plan was too big, that it overstimulated the economy, it poured too much money into the economy that was not needed. But you have to remember, on top of that, Democrats wanted to do Build Back Better. Yeah. They wanted to do, the rescue plan was $1.9 trillion. They wanted something that was $3.5 trillion. On top of that, I mean, they wanted
Byron, I got to ask you one question.
Of gasoline on this fire.
Before we run out of time, you're an omnivore of news. You are, and you're like me. All you do is read news and report on news. Have you watched a minute of the 1-6 hearings live? I read the summaries.
Yes, I have.
Oh, and how much have you watched?
I've watched the whole thing, and we could have talked about that, but nobody's interested.
Nobody's interested. They'd much rather talk about Phil Mickelson, PGA, inflation. Absolutely nobody's interested, and I can't change that. You can't change that, and all the networks in all the world doing everything at the same time can't make people interested in it. Byron York, thank you. Follow him on Twitter at Byron York. Follow me to the next segment, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Salem Media Group is always bringing in new talent, and Julie Hartman is one of the best. Julie just graduated from Harvard. I'm sure she had a wonderful commencement. More importantly, she's a Winthrop House graduate, so we have that in common. But sadly, she has fallen into the grips of Dennis Prager. And so my nemesis on the West Coast and Julie are doing a podcast, which is really successful and fun. But Julie, you've got to just be careful. Dennis tends to go on a little bit.
I don't think he goes on enough, actually.
Oh, no, don't encourage him. Julie, tell people about yourself before we talk about Dennis and Julie.
Yes, well, I'm 22 years old. As you just said, Hugh, I'm a recent Harvard graduate and a Winthrop House graduate. Winthrop House, for those of you who don't know, is an upperclassman dorm that Hugh and I were both in. And
only about 45 years apart, but yes.
That's right.
Yeah.
I'm from Los Angeles, and for most of my life, I was actually pretty liberal until I went to college. Well, actually, until I was sent home from college during COVID. And it was really, Hugh, during the Black Lives Matter riots. That was sort of my red pill. And I encountered Dennis Prager's work through PragerU, his organization. And I emailed him, of all things, thanking him for the way that he influenced my thinking. And miraculously, he saw my email. Miraculously, he responded to me. Miraculously, he invited me to come in and listen to his radio show. Miraculously, that day, he invited me on air. And then I ended up working for him last summer. And last summer, at the end of the summer, I guest hosted for Dennis and Mike Gallagher. How about that for a 180 in my life?
That is a 180, and now you are hosting a podcast with
That's
Dennis.
Right.
Tell people where they can access it and how often you drop an episode.
They can access it on YouTube if they would like to watch it on film, or on the salemnewschannel.com, or on Apple and Spotify if they would like to listen to the audio. And it comes out every Tuesday. So later today, everyone can listen to the episode that we recorded yesterday, which was really fun. We talked about a debate that Dennis recently had that I attended in Beverly Hills with a rabbi on the question, are people inherently good? It was a really, really interesting debate, and it's a really interesting episode. God, Hugh, I just pinch myself sometimes thinking that I'm doing a podcast with Dennis Prager. Just 2 years ago, I was reading his books, imagining what it would be like to meet him, and now he's one of my closest friends.
Well, I was telling Phil Boyce at the GM meeting, I'm very happy that the Salem Media group is reaching out to young people because eventually everybody ages out, even great ones like Dennis and utility infielders like me. Eventually everybody ages out. If you don't replenish the bench, you're not going to be a player. And if you don't embrace the new technology, now you got to look at Dennis's orange tip fingers. Have you seen those? Because he's a Cheeto addict. And has he told you about his skateboarding yet? Because the man won a skateboarding contest. And most importantly, Julie, when Dennis gets in his cups too many Cheetos and too many cigars, he will tell you about how he used to hula hoop on the corner in Queens, counting by tens in Russian to get people to give him money for games. And I'll tell you, he's an amazing guy. He's an omnivore. He's very smart, but there's some checkered stuff in his past.
Well, Hugh, I haven't seen his Cheeto habit, but what he does do a lot, he loves peanut butter M&Ms. And he used to convince everyone in the studio that he could decipher the color with his eyes closed, but he was playing us all. He looked before. So
that is Prager. He's got many addictions about which people think they're benign, but that's not one of them. Julie, when you sit in for Gallagher and Prager, you're working at decent hours. I hope you'll sit in, but that means 3 to 6 a.m. shift for me. That means going down to the KRLA studio 3 to 6 in the morning. I'm not sure that's even safe.
Well, Hugh, it would be an honor to host for you. I look forward to doing so. And by the way, you've got me up right now at 4:50 a.m. I'm on the West Coast. Actually, yep. Thank you, because now I have to start my day early. No excuses.
Well, when I'm on the West Coast, I do this show from 3 to 6 a.m. in the morning. Tape delays in other places, but that's why I'm an East Coast guy, East Coast Morning Drive. But Julie, the podcast is going to just lead to more and different sorts of adventures in the Salem Media universe. I am curious your advice for young people who want to stay informed. What's your daily reading habit? What's your daily media intake?
Hugh, I could be better about reading the daily news, but I have an eye towards the greater themes. I'm actually reading right now a magnificent book by Paul Johnson called Modern Times. Are you familiar with it?
Oh, yeah, I read that years ago. It's a classic, and it should never not be on people's bookshelves. It's a wonderful thing.
It's incredible, but it's a slog, as you know, because every sentence of his is just packed with information. So, of course, I would encourage people to read. But also what I would say to young people, and this is something that I found at Harvard, there are a lot of conservative, curious people out there. Everyone thinks of universities as these hotbeds of leftism, and they certainly are. But I actually was not as maligned on campus as I thought I would be after working for Dennis. And I would just say, if you are open about your beliefs and your values, you will influence more people than you think you will, who will probably never admit it.
Julie, congratulations on the podcast. People should go to Dennis and Julie, Dennis ampersand Julie, at the Salem Podcast Network, at iTunes, at Spotify. Just put in Dennis Prager, Julie Hartman, and you will be rewarded with a wonderful podcast. And you'll be hearing her behind this microphone and others for decades and decades to come. And we are very excited about that. Julie, have a good morning. I'm coming right back. Hour 3 of the Hugh Hewitt Show. Straight ahead, America. Welcome back, America. Hugh Hewitt. Last segment of today's Hugh Hewitt Show, or this hour actually, is with Adam Laxalt, who is going to be the next United States Senator from Nevada. He joins me from the Silver State this morning. Good morning, Adam. How are you?
Good morning. Thanks so much for having me.
Look, you have got a primary on June 14th. I expect you're going to win that handily. And Tuesday, the voting will be done, and then you'll be up against the invisible senator. I called her on Fox News last week. And just give me what you think that race is going to come down to, Adam Laxalt.
Well, look, first and foremost, as people start truly paying attention to control the Senate, everybody's going to understand quickly that it's going to come down to this race. This is the 51st seat, and we have a very, very small map. We've got to hold a lot of Republican seats, and we've got very few opportunities to flip. And so the good news is every single ratings agency has labeled her the most vulnerable senator in America. We had 6 consecutive polls where she was at 40, and we were beating her. And they're already spending gobs of money, including a Soros attack ad that's been up for the last many weeks, because they know that this is going to be the key to the Senate, and they know they've got a lot of work to do to dig her out of this hole.
So, Adam Laxalt, first, let's tell people what your website is, especially my Nevada audience, and they're on both in Las Vegas and Reno. How do they find Adam Laxalt?
AdamLaxalt.com. It's about as easy as you can get. Same for our social media.
All right, AdamLaxalt.com. Now, Adam, you're the Attorney General of Nevada. You know what the crime problem and the immigration problem is. Does that matter? And will Senator Cortez Masto even talk to you about it?
Yeah, look, I think this race is going to come down to these two key issues. I mean, there's no question that gas is a massive problem. We're number 2 in America right now, above Hawaii. If your listeners can believe that we have more expensive gas than a landlocked island. Inflation is number 2 in the country as well, which amounts to $12,000 a year tax on Nevadans. So those issues, they can't fix. We know the Biden administration are not going to change course, and she is stuck with those issues. But the next 2 major issues in our state is the border crisis and the law and order issues. And in both areas, she's in huge trouble. She's got the worst border record of any senator up for election this cycle, consistently stood with this open border agenda. And meanwhile, she's lying to voters now, saying that she's a tireless fighter against human trafficking. Well, we all know an open border is one of the main sources of human trafficking. And if she cared about our state, she would about face on that in order to reduce that terrible, terrible crime against children and adults that are being smuggled across the border. So we've got that going on. And, the other big clash is over the overall view of law enforcement. I'm the former top cop of this state. We had a tremendous relationship with law enforcement across Nevada, and she was nowhere to be found. And despite the fact that because she was a former AG, she was able to receive a bunch of law enforcement endorsements in her first Senate race in 2016, they have flipped to me for this race. And
that is a big deal.
Your listeners would understand. I mean, it's an incumbent senator. She's on the committees, et cetera. I mean, this is a big deal when they wake up and say she has not represented law enforcement, and we know that Adam Laxalt will stand with us.
No, Adam Laxalt, when I was on with Brett Baer talking about this race, I said it has to be killing Las Vegas that gas in California is $6.50 a gallon because people just don't drive the 15 over to Las Vegas. Am I right about that, or was I imagining that?
Look, there's no question that gas is just a massive, massive issue. And we started what we're calling Gas Can Man, and he's visiting the various pockets of Las Vegas where gas is over $6. I mean, it's just so hard to imagine. But she has been an absentee senator, and she's refused to do anything that goes against her left-wing base. And we all know there's a lot of things to be done that could start driving gas prices down today. Instead, she's rolling with the Putin price hike, greedy oil executive Khan. And, she's still not standing with Nevadans. And, $5.50, $6, $6.50, your listeners may understand this, but in Western states, we drive everywhere. We have massive distances is basically everything we do. And if you're going to get into rural Nevada, I mean, people are driving an hour or more every single day. And that's just regular gas. So you get diesel, what that's doing to trucking, which is a huge piece of our economy. I mean, this is a serious, serious problem. And from all I can tell, it's only going to get worse.
Adam Laxalt, keep coming back between now and November. I know you're going to win handily on the 14th and be the nominee. And then I look forward to talking to former Attorney General Adam Laxalt early and often. He's had Ron DeSantis as his secret weapon in the state. They were roomies together at the officer candidate school that he attended for the Navy. But we'll cover that next time. Adam Laxalt, thanks for joining me from the Silver State. Have a good afternoon, good morning, good day in America. Stay where you are.